What if I told you that some people never really grow up, not emotionally, not psychologically, not spiritually, and that this isn't an accident? What if I told you that some women, consciously or not, actively resist maturity, and that Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist who mapped the human soul, saw something in this phenomenon that most people ignore? This isn't about blame. This is about understanding. And once you understand it, you might start to see it in people you know or in yourself. So, let's begin with a question that might disturb you. What does it really mean to mature? Is it about paying bills, having kids, or just getting older? No, maturity is not about chronology, it's about integration. Integration of the unconscious, of the shadow, of the inner child. It's about seeing life clearly, without illusions, and accepting responsibility for your own soul. Jung called this process individuation. And here's the kicker, not everyone wants it. In fact, some of us run from it, especially when that process threatens the idealized self-image we cherish.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now, let me give you a hook. Jung identified a powerful archetype called the puella eterna, the eternal girl. This archetype is not just a poetic metaphor. It's a psychic reality. It's the part of the female psyche that resists adulthood, responsibility, and transformation. It wants to remain light, airy, free, untouched forever. And when this archetype dominates a woman's personality, she may appear charming, spontaneous, even magical. But underneath, something vital is missing, a confrontation with reality. Have you ever met someone who feels like they live in a dream? Who avoids confrontation, commitment, or anything that might destabilize their fantasy of life? They might be deeply spiritual, artistic, or idealistic, but they also might be disconnected, ungrounded, and allergic to suffering. Jung warned us, when the puella eterna is not balanced with the mature feminine, it becomes a prison made of fairy dust. You see, we live in a culture that worships youth. Social media has made this worship a religion. Women, in particular, are taught to value themselves based on how young, beautiful, and desirable they appear. And so, there is a subtle but powerful incentive to remain in the psychological state of the young girl, naive, unformed, and formed of potential. But potential without actualization is just a dream, and dreams without grounding become nightmares. Ask yourself this: have I ever confused being emotionally reactive with being authentic? Have I ever mistaken avoidance for freedom? These are the traps of the eternal girl. But here's something even deeper. Jung believed that every archetype has both light and shadow. The light side of the puella eterna is creativity, spontaneity, joy, and openness. But the shadow is resistance to growth, entitlement, narcissism, and fear of limitation. We all carry this archetype within us, to some degree men too, in the form of the pure eternus, but today we're focusing on women, because Jung noticed a striking pattern. Some women unconsciously choose to remain immature, not because they are weak, but because they are terrified of losing the illusion of being special, of being saved, of being forever young. Let me tell you a story. I once met a woman who was brilliant, radiant, wildly creative. She seemed like a muse come to life. But every relationship she entered collapsed. Every job bored her. Every commitment felt like a cage. When I asked her what she wanted, she said, "I just want to feel free." But the truth was, she wasn't free. She was floating, untethered. She had no center. And when life demanded something from her, pain, sacrifice, discipline, she vanished. Not physically, but psychically. She had built her whole identity around not growing up. So here's the hard truth. Maturity is a death. It's the death of fantasy, the death of the idealized self, the death of the perfect future we imagined as children. And many of us women especially, due to cultural pressures, are not prepared for that death. So instead, we cling to the fantasy. We stay the girl. We wait for rescue. But no one is coming. And here's the paradox. The more we resist maturity, the more we suffer. Because life will demand something from you. It will ask you to sacrifice your illusions in exchange for real wisdom. And if you say no, life doesn't get gentler. It gets louder. At this point, I want to ask you a deeper question. What part of yourself have you refused to let grow up? Is there a dream, a belief, a way of seeing the world that you cling to even though it hurts you? Be honest, that's where your puella lives. Now, Jung didn't just diagnose this condition. He offered a path forward. He said the eternal girl must eventually meet the crone, the wise woman within. The crone is not glamorous. She is not adored. She is not youthful. But she sees. She holds paradox. She embraces death and rebirth. She is the archetype of integration. But to meet her, the puella must descend. She must let go of the fantasy. She must confront the shadow. And this, my friends, is where most people stop. Because the descent is terrifying. It feels like madness, depression, loss. But Jung insisted, this descent is sacred. It is the path to wholeness. So, what does this look like in real life? It means owning your flaws, taking responsibility for your emotional reactions, facing your fear of aging, of being ordinary, of being alone. It means embracing limitation rather than fleeing from it. It means choosing to mature not because the world wants you to, but because your soul demands it. Let me offer a practical insight here. If you want to begin this journey, start by watching your fantasies. Not judging them, just observing. Notice where your mind goes when life gets hard. Do you escape into a dream of rescue, of perfection, of romance? That's your puella. She's not evil. She just doesn't want to grow up. Talk to her. Ask her what she fears. You might be surprised by what she says. And now, let's switch gears and bring in a modern parallel. In today's world, we are bombarded with images of ideal femininity, influencers, filters, fairy tales wrapped in luxury branding. It's no wonder many women struggle with maturity. They are being told that to grow up is to become invisible, that to age is to become worthless. But this is a lie, a dangerous one, because true power does not lie in appearing young. It lies in becoming whole. So how do we reclaim that power? We begin by redefining what it means to be a woman. Not a girl, not a fantasy, but a woman anchored, integrated, sovereign. This requires inner work, shadow work, emotional honesty, and above all, the courage to confront the stories we've been sold. Let me leave you with a thought experiment. Imagine a world where women were raised not to be desirable, but to be wise. What kind of world would that be? What kind of relationships would we have? What kind of art, families, communities? Would we still worship youth, or would we revere depth? And now I turn the question to you: which archetype runs your life, the eternal girl or the wise woman? You don't need to answer right away. But if you stay with the question, it might open a door inside you, the door to your own becoming. We ended the last part with the question: which archetype runs your life, the eternal girl or the wise woman? If that question haunted you even a little, good. Because it means you're on the edge of transformation. You're standing at the threshold of something sacred. Let's go deeper. Carl Jung didn't just study the psyche, he mapped its terrain. He knew that the journey to maturity isn't a straight line. It's a descent, and descents are never elegant. They are messy, painful, uncertain, but they are also where the soul is forged. For a woman dominated by the puella eterna, the descent begins when life no longer lets her escape, when the dream starts to rot. The relationships that once seemed magical start to collapse. The endless possibilities begin to feel like paralysis. The self-image of being special, of being different, starts to crack. And underneath is fear. Raw, animal fear. Who am I if I'm no longer the girl? This moment, though terrifying, is the beginning of awakening. You see, the eternal girl lives in a fantasy of potential. She doesn't want to choose. To choose is to limit herself. But ironically, until we choose, we are not free, we are scattered. Maturity means sacrificing the fantasy of infinite possibilities for the grounded reality of one authentic path. It means saying, this is who I am, this is my work, these are my people. But how many of us are truly willing to choose? Here's a brutal truth: freedom without structure is chaos. The puella resists structure because she equates it with death. But it is only through structure that true creativity and power can emerge. This is the paradox that women must wrestle with to become whole. I must let something die. Maybe it's the need to be adored. Maybe it's the fantasy of being rescued. Maybe it's the belief that suffering is unfair, or that real life is beneath you. Whatever it is, it must be sacrificed not because life is cruel, but because you are meant for something deeper. Let me bring you into a psychological moment that happens again and again in therapy rooms, in spiritual crises, and in dark nights of the soul. A woman sits across from the mirror of her own life. She sees the patterns, the failed relationships, the emotional immaturity, the avoidance. She sees the girl she once was, still clinging, still hoping. And then she asks the most powerful question a human being can ask. What am I pretending not to know? That question is the gateway to the descent. It's the moment when the ego surrenders, even slightly, and the unconscious begins to rise. This is where shadow work begins. The woman starts to see what she's denied: the rage, the envy, the wounds, the manipulations, and the way she's used charm instead of character, avoidance instead of boundaries, victimhood instead of voice. And here comes the hardest part, owning it. Not blaming, not explaining, just owning. Because that's how the girl becomes a woman, not by being perfect, but by being whole. Let me offer a metaphor. Imagine your psyche as a garden. The eternal girl wants only flowers. She avoids the compost. But the wise woman knows the best soil is made from decay, from what has died, been broken down, transformed. That's shadow work, turning the rot into nourishment, the wound into wisdom. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. How many women believe their suffering is just bad luck, or that life is unfair, when in truth, they are living out unconscious patterns that they refuse to confront. So how do we make the unconscious conscious? First, we pay attention to our projections. Who triggers us? Who fascinates us? Who do we idealize or demonize? These are mirrors showing us what we've disowned in ourselves. The Puella disowns her own capacity for power, responsibility, and grounded love. She projects those qualities onto others, then either worships them or resents them. Second, we reclaim our emotions. Maturity means feeling fully without drowning. That anger, sadness, grief, these are not weaknesses. They are signals. Initiations. The eternal girl avoids them because they threaten her image. The wise woman embraces them because they deepen her soul. Third, we stop waiting to be chosen. The Puella waits for life to pick her, for a man to love her, a job to discover her, a platform to anoint her. But the moment a woman decides to choose herself, to define her value, her path, her truth, that's when she begins to crown herself. This is the crowning Jung pointed to, not a literal crown, but the inner coronation of sovereignty. It's when the woman stops outsourcing her worth, when she stops needing to be liked, when she starts building instead of floating. Let me ask you something provocative. What would your life look like if you stopped performing and started embodying? Performing is exhausting. Embodying is liberating. And here's where we tie it all together. The woman who descends, who faces her shadow, who lets the fantasy die, doesn't become less beautiful. She becomes radiant. Not because she conforms to some ideal, but because she carries depth, gravity, mystery. She becomes the crone, not in age, but in essence. She becomes someone who others turn to, not to be entertained, but to be transformed. And ironically, it is only when the eternal girl dies that the true muse is born. Let me give you a real-world example. Think of artists, leaders, creators who inspire you. The ones who carry a kind of soul weight. They didn't get there by staying young forever. They got there by going through hell, by being cracked open, by losing what they thought they needed only to find what they truly are. That's the gift of maturity, not comfort, not applause, but truth. And here's the final twist. Once you integrate the Puella, she doesn't disappear. She matures too. She becomes your playful, creative force. But now she's grounded. She's not driving the car, she's dancing in the passenger seat while the wise woman holds the wheel. This is not the death of joy. It's the rebirth of joy with roots. So what does this mean for you? It means asking yourself hard questions. It means looking at your patterns, not with shame, but with curiosity. It means embracing limitation as a doorway to depth. It means letting your suffering teach you, letting your illusions die, letting the girl become the woman. And it means choosing again and again not to float, but to root. Because the world doesn't need more eternal girls trapped in fantasy. It needs women who have crowned themselves through descent, women who can hold paradox, lead with soul, and love with clarity. So I'll leave you with this. What illusion are you finally ready to let die? Sit with that. Write it down. Mourn it if you need to. And then, when you're ready, take one step toward your descent. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as telling the truth, saying no, saying yes, owning your power. Because the descent is not the end. It's the path to the crown. And when you wear that crown not as ornament, but as essence, something incredible happens. You stop chasing freedom, and you become it.